I was standing in my backyard on a Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona, when I heard the excavator rumbling down Sagebrush Lane. The sound made my stomach drop because I knew exactly what it meant. The HOA was finally making good on their threat to install that damned sidewalk, and they were about to destroy the French drain system I had spent $8,000 installing just 2 years ago. My name is Grant Vickers, and I had been fighting with the Sunridge Meadows Homeowners Association for the better part of 6 months. It started innocently enough when I received a letter in my mailbox informing me that the board had voted to install a continuous sidewalk along our street. The problem was that my property sat on a slight slope, and the previous owners had dealt with chronic flooding in the crawlspace by installing an elaborate French drain system that ran along the exact path where they wanted to put their precious sidewalk. I walked around to the front of my house and saw the excavator parked 3 houses down, already tearing into the Hendersons' lawn. Behind it was a white pickup truck with the HOA president's vanity plate, Sunridge 1. My jaw clenched. Of course Sharon Pemberton would be here personally to oversee this disaster. Sharon climbed out of the truck, clipboard in hand, her highlighted blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She was wearing khaki capris and a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it, looking every bit the middle-aged suburban enforcer she had become since being elected president 2 years ago. She spotted me immediately, and her expression hardened. "Mr. Vickers," she called out, her voice dripping with false professionalism. "I trust you received our final notice about the construction beginning today." I walked down my driveway to meet her on the sidewalk, trying to keep my voice level. "Sharon, you know as well as I do that tearing out my French drain is going to cause serious problems. That system is the only thing keeping my crawlspace from flooding. We get monsoon rains here." She made a show of flipping through papers on her clipboard. "According to the Sunridge Meadows CC and Articus, the HOA has full authority over common areas, which includes the landscaping strip between your property line and the street. The French drain was installed without HOA approval, which technically makes it a violation." "That's complete nonsense, and you know it," I said, feeling heat rise in my face. "The previous owners installed it in 2018, before you added that amendment to the bylaws. And even if it was in violation, you cannot just destroy someone's drainage system without providing an alternative solution." Sharon's eyes narrowed. The sidewalk project was approved by a majority vote of the board. The construction will proceed as planned. If you experience any drainage issues, you are welcome to submit a modification request for an alternative drainage solution, which the board will review at the next monthly meeting. "The next meeting is not until June 15th, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "The monsoon season starts in June. You are setting me up for thousands of dollars in water damage." "That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Vickers." Sharon turned away from me and waved to the excavator operator, motioning him to continue down the street. I spent the next hour watching helplessly as the machine methodically tore up the landscaping strip in front of each house. The operator was efficient and professional, clearly having done this kind of work many times before. When he reached my property, I walked out one more time, my phone in hand, recording everything. The excavator's bucket bit into the ground right where my French drain began. I could see the perforated pipe and the layers of gravel that allowed water to drain away from my foundation. Within 20 minutes, it was all gone, replaced by a trench of disturbed earth that would soon become a concrete sidewalk. "I want it on record that I objected to this," I said loudly, making sure my phone captured everything. I want it documented that the HOA was warned about the drainage issues this would cause. Sharon, who had been supervising from a safe distance, walked over with her phone out as well. And I want it on record that Mr. Vickers was notified multiple times about this approved construction project and chose not to pursue proper channels to address his concerns. I sent 3 certified letters to the board, I shot back. I attended 2 meetings. I even offered to pay for an independent engineer to assess the drainage situation. You ignored all of it. The board considered your input and decided to proceed, she said primly. That is how democracy works, Mr. Vickers. After the excavator moved on to the next property, I went inside and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen. I had used him when I bought the house, and he had experience with HOA disputes. His paralegal told me he was in court but would call me back before the end of the day. True to his word, Marcus called me at 4:30 that afternoon. I explained the situation, the destroyed French drain, Sharon's dismissive attitude, and my concerns about the upcoming monsoon season. You have documentation of the French drain installation? Marcus asked. Yes, complete records from when the previous owners had it installed. Receipts, permits from the city, inspection reports, everything. It was all disclosed during the sale. Good. And you have proof that you notified the HOA about your concerns before they started construction. Certified letters, email chains, even video recordings of me speaking during public comment periods at board meetings. I heard Marcus typing on his keyboard. Okay, here is what we are going to do. I am going to send a letter to the HOA putting them on notice that if you experience any property damage as a result of their construction, you will be holding them financially liable. We will also request that they provide you with a temporary drainage solution until you can present an alternative plan. Do you think they will actually do anything? I asked, feeling skeptical. Probably not, Marcus admitted, but it establishes a paper trail. If this ends up in court, we need to show that you did everything reasonable to prevent the damage and that they were explicitly warned. Also, do you know if they pulled proper permits for this sidewalk project? That question stopped me cold. I have no idea. Look into it. Call the city planning department. If they are doing this construction without proper permits, that is a whole different problem. The next morning, I called the Phoenix Planning and Development Department. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone in the permits division who could help me. I gave them my address and asked about permits for sidewalk construction on Sagebrush Lane. The clerk put me on hold for several minutes before coming back on the line. I show a permit application that was submitted by the Sunridge Meadows HOA in February, but it was flagged for incomplete information. They were supposed to submit a drainage plan showing how the construction would affect existing drainage systems, but we never received it. The permit was never actually issued. My heart started pounding. So they are doing this construction without a valid permit. If the work has already started, then yes, that would be unpermitted construction. You can file a complaint and we will send an inspector out. I filed the complaint immediately. The clerk told me an inspector would be out within 48 hours. I called Marcus back and told him what I had discovered. He actually laughed. Well, that is incredibly stupid of them. Unpermitted construction gives the city the authority to issue a stop work order and potentially fine the HOA. Keep me updated. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to see how the other homeowners were reacting to the construction. Most of the houses on Sagebrush Lane were occupied by families who kept to themselves, but I knew a few people well enough to have a conversation. I found my neighbor 3 doors down, Pete Lawson, standing in his yard looking at the fresh dirt where his landscaping used to be. Pete was a retired contractor in his 60s, and I had talked to him a few times about the French drain issue. They really went through with it, Pete said, shaking his head. Sharon acts like she is running a military operation instead of a neighborhood association. Did you have any drainage systems in that area? I asked. Nothing as elaborate as yours, but I had some drainage rock and a small catch basin that directed water away from my garage. That is all gone now. He gestured at the torn-up ground. I told them about it at the meeting back in March, but Sharon said it was not significant enough to change the plans. You know, if anyone else on the street had drainage concerns, Pete thought for a moment. The Chens at the end of the street, I think. Their property is at the low point of the slope, so they get runoff from everyone else. I remember David Chen asking about it at one of the meetings. I walked down to the Chen house and found David in his garage. He was in his 40s, worked in tech, and had 2 young kids. I had talked to him a few times at neighborhood gatherings. Grant, right? He said, looking up from the bike he was repairing. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this sidewalk construction. Did you have any drainage concerns? David's expression darkened. Concerns? I begged them not to do this. Our property is at the bottom of the slope. Before we moved in, the previous owner told us they had problems with water pooling in the backyard during heavy rains. That is why they installed drains along the front to divert the water to the street. Those drains are now completely gone. Did you tell the HOA? Multiple times. Sharon told me that the new sidewalk would actually improve drainage because it would be sloped properly. I even offered to pay for a civil engineer to review the plans, but she said it was not necessary because they had already consulted with their contractor. Their contractor is not an engineer, I said. He is just the guy with the excavator. David set down the wrench he was holding. I know. I tried to explain that to Sharon, but she accused me of trying to delay the project. She said if I kept causing problems, she would start looking into other potential violations of the CC and Articus on my property. She threatened you, not directly, but the implication was clear. I have 2 kids and a full-time job. I do not have the time or energy to fight with the HOA. I just hope the drainage thing works itself out. I left David's house feeling even more frustrated. Sharon was not just ignoring concerns. She was actively intimidating people into silence. The city inspector showed up the next day, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Rebecca Torres. I met her on my front lawn and explained the situation. She walked the length of the construction area, taking photos and making notes on a tablet. You are right, there is no active permit for this work, she said. I am going to issue a stop work order immediately. The HOA will need to submit complete plans, including a drainage study, before they can continue. How long will that take? I asked. Depends on how quickly they get their paperwork together. If they hire a proper engineer and do it right, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. If they try to fight it or cut corners, could be months. Rebecca posted the stop work order on a bright orange sign right in front of Sharon's white pickup truck, which was parked at the end of the street. I watched from my porch as Sharon emerged from one of the houses and saw the sign. Even from a distance, I could see her face turn red. She ripped the sign off the post and stormed over to where Rebecca was standing. I could not hear the conversation, but I could see Sharon gesturing angrily while Rebecca stood with her arms crossed, unmoved by the display. After a few minutes, Rebecca handed Sharon some paperwork and walked back to her city vehicle. Sharon looked around the street, and her eyes locked on me standing on my porch. She marched up my driveway, the orange stop work order crumpled in her fist. You did this, she hissed when she got close enough. You called the city on us. I asked if proper permits had been pulled, I said calmly. Turns out they had not been. That is on you, not me. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost the HOA? We already paid the contractor a deposit. Now we have to hire an engineer to do studies that are completely unnecessary. If the studies are unnecessary, then you should not have any problem passing them, I said. Unless you know that tearing out everyone's drainage systems is going to cause problems and you just do not care. Sharon stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You are making an enemy of the wrong person, Mr. Vickers. I have been president of this HOA for 2 years, and I know every single line of the CC and Articus. I will make your life miserable if you keep interfering with board business. Is that a threat? I asked, pulling out my phone. Because I am happy to record it if you want to repeat that. She glared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back to her truck. As she drove away, I noticed several neighbors peeking out from behind curtains and blinds. Sharon's little tantrum had not gone unnoticed. That evening, I received an email from the HOA attorney, a firm called Preston and Associates. The email informed me that I was being fined $500 for interfering with approved HOA business, and another $250 for failure to maintain front yard landscaping to community standards. The landscaping violation was particularly galling considering the HOA had just torn up my front yard. I forwarded the email to Marcus, who called me 20 minutes later. This is retaliation, plain and simple, he said. They are trying to punish you for filing the complaint with the city. Do not pay these fines. I am going to respond on your behalf and make it very clear that any further retaliatory action will result in a lawsuit. Can they actually do this? I asked. They can try, but it is not going to hold up. The landscaping fine is absurd given that they destroyed your landscaping, and the interference fine is completely baseless. You exercised your right as a citizen to report unpermitted construction. That is not HOA interference. Over the next few weeks, the construction site sat untouched, the torn-up ground slowly becoming overgrown with weeds. I received 2 more fine notices from the HOA, one for the weeds growing in the construction area, and another for unapproved modifications to my backyard, where I had installed a rain barrel to collect water from my gutters. Marcus sent strongly worded responses to each fine, and I did not pay any of them. Meanwhile, the HOA had apparently hired an engineering firm to do the drainage study the city required. I knew this because David Chen told me he had seen surveyors in the neighborhood taking measurements. In early June, just as Marcus had predicted, the monsoon season began. Phoenix monsoons are no joke. The storms roll in with spectacular lightning shows and dump incredible amounts of rain in short periods. The first major storm hit on June 7th, a Thursday evening. I was eating dinner when I heard the thunder start to rumble. Within minutes, rain was coming down so hard I could barely see across the street. I went to my crawlspace access panel and checked inside with a flashlight, half expecting to see water pouring in. But the backup drainage system I had installed along the back of the house was handling things fine. The water that would normally have been diverted by my French drain was pooling in the front yard, but it was slowly soaking into the ground rather than flowing toward the foundation. The storm lasted about 45 minutes. When it finally passed, I went outside to assess the damage. My front yard was a muddy mess, but nothing catastrophic. I walked down the street to see how the other houses had fared. The damage got progressively worse as I moved down the slope. Pete Lawson's garage had about an inch of water seeping under the door. He was out there with a push broom trying to sweep it away. Further down, the Chen's property was dealing with something much worse. Water had pooled in their front yard to a depth of at least 6 inches, and it was slowly draining into the street, but not before saturating the ground around their foundation. David Chen was standing in his driveway, looking shell-shocked. "This never happened before," he said when he saw me. "Even during the worst storms, the water always drained away. Now it has nowhere to go. You need to document this," I told him. "Take photos, videos, everything. This is exactly what we warned them about." Over the next week, 3 more storms hit the area. Each time, the same pattern repeated. Water pooled in the front yards where the French drains used to be, with the worst flooding at the bottom of the slope where the Chens lived. After the 4th storm, I noticed something troubling. There was a crack forming in the stucco on the side of the Chen's house, running vertically from about 3 feet off the ground to just below the roof line. I knocked on their door and David answered, looking exhausted. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "No," he said bluntly. "We have water in the basement. Not a lot, but it is seeping in through the foundation. And this morning I noticed cracks in the walls. Have you contacted the HOA?" I sent Sharon 3 emails with photos. She responded to the first one saying that the cracks were probably pre-existing and that water infiltration was a homeowner responsibility. After that, she stopped responding. "You need to hire a structural engineer," I said. "Get a professional assessment of what is happening and why. Then send the report to the HOA and tell them you are holding them liable." David ran a hand through his hair. "Do you know how much that costs? More than you want to spend, but less than it will cost to fix foundation damage if you wait. Trust me on this." 2 days later, I got a call from Pete Lawson. "Grant, you need to come see this." I walked down to Pete's house and found him in his backyard, pointing at his foundation. There was a visible crack running along the base of the house, and the ground nearby was damp despite not having rained in 2 days. "This was not here before the sidewalk construction," Pete said. "I am positive. I had some work done on the foundation about 5 years ago, and it has been solid ever since. You think it is related to the drainage? I know it is. The ground is staying saturated because the water has nowhere to go. Saturated soil expands, puts pressure on the foundation, and cracks start forming. This is basic stuff." Pete had been a contractor for 30 years, so I trusted his assessment. "Are you going to contact the HOA?" "Already did. Sharon told me to file a claim with my homeowner's insurance." Can you believe that? That evening, I was sitting on my back patio when I heard a commotion out front. I walked around to see Sharon's white pickup truck parked in front of my house. She was standing on the sidewalk with another woman I recognized as Linda Patterson, the HOA vice president. They were both staring at my front yard and taking photos. "Can I help you?" I called out. Sharon jumped slightly, not having noticed me. "We are documenting violations," she said. "Your front yard is full of standing water and mud which violates the CC and Articus regarding property maintenance." I looked at the muddy mess that used to be my landscaping. "You mean the destruction your construction project caused?" "The construction has been paused," Linda said. She was in her early 50s, usually more reasonable than Sharon, but apparently going along with this charade. "You have had weeks to restore your landscaping. The construction area is still an active work site under a city stop work order," I said. "I am not allowed to modify it until the project is either completed or officially canceled. You know that." Sharon tapped something on her phone. "I am noting your continued refusal to comply with community standards. This will be added to your growing list of violations." They left, but I knew this was not over. I called Marcus and told him about the encounter. "They are building a case to put a lien on your property," Marcus said. "If they can accumulate enough fines, they can claim you are delinquent and file a lien, which would affect your ability to sell or refinance. It is a common intimidation tactic. Can they actually do that? They can try, but given that the fines are clearly retaliatory and based on conditions they created, it would not hold up in court. However, fighting it would still cost you time and money. Let me send another letter making it clear that any lien attempt will result in an immediate lawsuit for harassment and abuse of authority. In mid-June, I attended the monthly HOA board meeting. These meetings were held in the community center, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance. There were about 20 homeowners in attendance, much higher than the usual 5 or 6. The drainage issues and foundation cracks had people concerned. Sharon called the meeting to order and went through the standard agenda items: financial report, landscaping updates, pool maintenance schedule. She was clearly trying to rush through everything to avoid discussion of the sidewalk project. During the open comment period, David Chen stood up. He looked like he had not slept in days. "I want to address the drainage issues caused by the sidewalk construction," he began. Sharon cut him off immediately. "The sidewalk project is currently on hold pending city requirements. We will update the community when there is new information." "That is not good enough," David said, his voice rising. "My house has sustained water damage and foundation cracks as a direct result of this project. I have an engineer's report that confirms the damage is due to the removal of the drainage systems. The HOA needs to take responsibility." Several other homeowners murmured in agreement. Sharon's face tightened. "If you have property damage, Mr. Chen, you should file a claim with your insurance company. The HOA is not responsible for individual property maintenance." "This is not maintenance," David shot back. "This is damage caused by the HOA's negligence. You were warned by multiple homeowners that this would happen, and you ignored us. Now several houses have foundation damage." Pete Lawson stood up. "My house has cracks too, and the Hendersons have water intrusion. This is a serious problem that the HOA created." Sharon banged her gavel on the table. "The board will take your concerns under advisement. This is not the appropriate forum for individual property disputes." "Then what is the appropriate forum?" I asked, standing up. "Because you have ignored emails, certified letters, and reports from licensed engineers. You are just hoping this problem goes away, but it is not going away. It is getting worse with every storm." Linda Patterson leaned over and whispered something to Sharon. The treasurer, a quiet man named Robert Kim, looked uncomfortable. The fourth board member, Secretary Jennifer Walsh, was staring at her notepad. Sharon composed herself and spoke in a measured tone. "The board takes all homeowner concerns seriously. We will be reviewing the engineering reports and consulting with our attorney to determine the appropriate course of action. In the meantime, homeowners are responsible for maintaining their own properties in accordance with the CC and Articus." "So that is it," David Chen said, his voice breaking slightly. "You destroy our drainage, damage our homes, and then tell us it is our problem." "This meeting is adjourned," Sharon announced, banging the gavel again. As people filed out, I noticed several homeowners gathering in the parking lot. I joined them, along with David, Pete, and a few others I had not met before. A woman in her 30s introduced herself as Michelle Henderson. "Our house is the third one from the corner," she said. "We have water coming through the basement wall now. My husband called 3 different contractors, and they all said the same thing. The ground is oversaturated because there is no drainage." "How many houses are affected?" I asked. People started counting. At least 8 properties on Sagebrush Lane had reported either foundation cracks, water intrusion, or both. All of them were on the downslope side where water was accumulating. "We need to organize," Pete said. "We need to present a unified front to the HOA and make it clear that they are legally liable for this damage." "I have an attorney," I offered. "He specializes in HOA disputes. I can ask him about representing multiple homeowners." Over the next few days, I coordinated with the affected homeowners. Marcus agreed to meet with us as a group. We gathered at Pete's house on a Saturday morning, 9 homeowners in total, each with documentation of the damage to their properties. Marcus reviewed the engineer's reports, photos, and correspondence with the HOA. "This is pretty clear-cut negligence," he said. The HOA was warned repeatedly about the drainage issues. They proceeded with unpermitted construction, and now multiple properties have sustained damage as a direct result. "You have a strong case." "What are our options?" David asked. "First, I recommend sending a formal demand letter to the HOA board and their insurance carrier, outlining the damages and demanding compensation. Give them 30 days to respond. If they refuse or ignore the demand, we file a lawsuit." "How much is this going to cost?" Michelle Henderson asked. "If we do this as a group action, we can split the legal fees. I estimate initial costs around $1,500 per household for the demand letter and preliminary work. If it goes to trial, costs could increase, but we would be seeking to recover all legal fees from the HOA as part of the damages." Everyone agreed to move forward. Marcus drafted a comprehensive demand letter documenting each property's damage, the timeline of events, the HOA's negligence, and a demand for full compensation for repairs, engineering assessments, and related costs. The total came to just over $87,000. The letter was sent via certified mail to each board member, the HOA's registered agent, and their insurance company. We also sent copies to the management company that handled HOA administrative tasks. 2 weeks went by with no response. Then, on July 3rd, just before the holiday weekend, I received a letter from Preston and Associates, the HOA's law firm. The letter denied all liability and claimed that the homeowners had failed to properly maintain their properties. It also stated that the alleged damages were either pre-existing or caused by factors unrelated to the sidewalk project. The letter concluded with a threat. If the homeowners did not withdraw their demands and pay all outstanding fines within 14 days, the HOA would pursue liens against the properties and potentially file a lawsuit for defamation and harassment. I immediately forwarded the letter to Marcus, who called me that evening. "Well, they are going with the denial and intimidation strategy. Not surprising, but also not smart. This letter actually helps our case because it shows their unwillingness to address legitimate concerns." "So what happens now?" "Now we file the lawsuit. I will start drafting the complaint next week. We will be suing for property damage, negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly punitive damages if we can show willful disregard for homeowner safety." "How long will this take?" Civil cases can take anywhere from several months to a couple of years, depending on how much the HOA fights it. But I am betting their insurance company will push for settlement once they see the evidence. Insurance companies do not like going to trial when liability is this clear. The lawsuit was filed in Maricopa County Superior Court on July 22nd. We sued the Sunridge Meadows Homeowners Association, the individual board members in their official capacities, and the construction company that did the excavation work. The local news picked up the story about a week later. A reporter from one of the Phoenix TV stations came out to interview us. David, Pete, and I spoke on camera about what had happened. The segment aired on the evening news and showed the foundation cracks, the standing water, and the torn-up construction site. Sharon was also interviewed. She stood in front of the community center and gave a statement that the HOA had acted in the best interests of the community and that the allegations were exaggerated and unfounded. She claimed the homeowners were trying to avoid paying legitimate fines. The news coverage changed everything. Suddenly, the story was all over local social media. The HOA Facebook page was flooded with comments from Sunridge Meadows residents asking questions and expressing concern. Several people who had not been directly affected by the drainage issues started asking questions about how the board was spending HOA funds and whether other projects had been properly permitted. At the next board meeting in August, the community center was packed. At least 50 homeowners showed up, standing room only. The tension in the room was palpable. Sharon tried to maintain control, but she was clearly rattled by the turnout. When she opened the floor for comments, hands shot up all over the room. A man I did not recognize stood up. "I want to know why the board proceeded with construction without a valid permit. Who made that decision?" Sharon cleared her throat. "The board relied on advice from our contractor, who assured us that all necessary permits were in order. We were not aware of any issues until the city inspector arrived." "That is not true," I said from the back of the room. "The city has records showing the permit application was incomplete and that the HOA was notified back in March that they needed to submit a drainage plan. You chose to proceed anyway." The room erupted in cross-talk. Someone shouted, "Who is going to pay for the lawsuit?" Another voice called out, "We need a vote of no confidence." Sharon banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order, we need order." Linda Patterson, the vice president, leaned into her microphone. "I think the homeowners deserve answers. Sharon, did you know the permit was incomplete when construction started?" Sharon's face went pale. "I was told it was a minor paperwork issue that would be resolved." "By whom?" Linda pressed. "By the contractor." "Did you verify that with the city?" Sharon did not answer. The silence stretched out uncomfortably. Robert Kim, the treasurer, spoke up for the first time. "I want to note for the record that I voted against the Sidewalk project at the initial board meeting. I had concerns about the cost and the drainage issues that homeowners raised. I was outvoted 3-1. Jennifer Walsh, the secretary, nodded. "I also raised concerns about the drainage, but Sharon assured us that the contractor had addressed those issues in the plans." Sharon stood abruptly. "I do not have to sit here and be attacked. This meeting is adjourned." She walked out, leaving the other 3 board members at the table. Linda looked stunned. "I guess I am running the rest of this meeting," she said. "Does anyone have a motion?" A woman near the front stood. "I motion for a special election to recall the current president and elect a new board." "I second," someone else called out. Linda looked at Jennifer, who was furiously flipping through the HOA bylaws. "According to the governing documents, a special election can be called if 20% of homeowners sign a petition requesting it." "Then let's do it," the woman said. "I will organize the petition." Over the next 2 weeks, a petition circulated through the neighborhood. It easily gathered the required signatures. A special election was scheduled for September 15th. Meanwhile, the lawsuit was moving forward. The HOA's insurance company had assigned them a defense attorney, a woman named Patricia Reeves from a large firm in downtown Phoenix. She filed a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that the homeowners had not exhausted internal HOA dispute resolution processes before suing. Marcus opposed the motion, pointing out that the homeowners had repeatedly tried to work with the HOA and that the internal dispute process was controlled by the same board members who were defendants in the case. The judge denied the motion to dismiss and ordered both parties to proceed with discovery. Discovery meant that we could request documents from the HOA, including all correspondence about the Sidewalk project, board meeting minutes, financial records, and communications with the contractor and engineer. Marcus submitted extensive discovery requests, and the HOA had 30 days to respond. In early September, just before the special election, Marcus called me with news. "You are not going to believe what we found in the HOA's documents." Sharon exchanged emails with the contractor back in March, where he explicitly told her that the city permit had been denied due to incomplete drainage plans. She responded by telling him to proceed anyway, and that they would deal with the city if necessary. "So she knew," I said. "She absolutely knew, and there is more. The HOA's insurance policy has a clause excluding coverage for damages resulting from unpermitted construction or willful misconduct. If we can prove Sharon deliberately ignored the permit requirement, the insurance company might deny coverage, which means the HOA would be personally liable for all damages. What happens to the board members personally? They could be individually liable if we can pierce the corporate veil, so to speak. It depends on whether they acted in good faith or if there was gross negligence or willful misconduct. The special election took place on a Tuesday evening in mid-September. The turnout was unprecedented for an HOA election. Over 70% of homeowners voted. Sharon was removed as president by a margin of 83-12. Linda Patterson was elected as the new president, along with 2 new board members who ran on a platform of transparency and accountability. At the first meeting under the new board, Linda addressed the lawsuit directly. "We have reviewed the situation thoroughly, and it is clear that the previous board made serious errors in judgment. We have met with our insurance carrier and our attorney, and we are prepared to enter into settlement negotiations with the affected homeowners." It was a stunning reversal. Marcus met with Patricia Reeves and the insurance adjuster the following week. After 2 days of negotiations, they reached a settlement agreement. The HOA would pay for all foundation repairs, water damage remediation, and restoration of the drainage systems. The total settlement was $93,000, plus legal fees. The homeowners would dismiss the lawsuit and waive any further claims related to the Sidewalk project. Additionally, the HOA would hire a licensed civil engineer to design a proper drainage solution that would work with the planned sidewalk. Construction would not resume until all permits were properly obtained and all affected homeowners had approved the drainage plan. I signed the settlement agreement in October, along with the other 8 homeowners. By November, contractors were at work repairing foundations and installing new drainage systems. These new systems were actually better than what we had before, with larger pipes and proper grading to handle the monsoon runoff, but the story was not quite over. In late November, I received a call from a detective with the Phoenix Police Department. Detective Sarah Martinez wanted to ask me some questions about the HOA situation. I agreed to meet with her. Detective Martinez explained that the county attorney's office had been reviewing the case and had concerns about potential criminal conduct. Knowingly proceeding with unpermitted construction can be a criminal violation under Arizona law, she said. And if there was fraud or misrepresentation involved in how HOA funds were spent, that could be embezzlement or theft. "Are you investigating Sharon Pemberton?" I asked. "I cannot comment on specific targets of an investigation, but I can tell you that we are looking at the decision-making process that led to this situation. Can you walk me through the timeline of events from your perspective?" I spent 2 hours with Detective Martinez, going through everything. The initial notices, the meetings where concerns were raised, Sharon's dismissive responses, the unpermitted construction, and the subsequent damage. I provided copies of all the emails, letters, and recordings I had. "This is very helpful," Detective Martinez said. "One more question. Do you know what happened to the money the HOA paid to the contractor as a deposit?" "No, I do not. I know they paid something upfront, but I do not know the amount." According to the HOA financial records, they paid the contractor $30,000 before construction began. But the contractor's records show he only received $15,000. We are trying to figure out where the other $15,000 went. That revelation was shocking. "You think Sharon stole it?" "I think there are discrepancies that need to be explained. Thank you for your time, Mr. Vickers." 2 weeks later, Sharon Pemberton was arrested at her home and charged with theft, fraud, and reckless endangerment. The investigation had revealed that she had indeed pocketed $15,000 from the contractor deposit by having him invoice for the full amount, but only paying him half, then creating false records to cover the difference. She had also received kickbacks from the contractor on 2 previous HOA projects. The reckless endangerment charge stemmed from her decision to proceed with construction, despite knowing it would create drainage problems that could damage homes. The prosecutor argued that she had knowingly created conditions that posed a substantial risk to property and potentially to people. The arrest made the news again. This time, the story was about HOA corruption and abuse of power. Sharon's mugshot was all over social media, and the comments were brutal. People from other HOAs around Phoenix started sharing their own horror stories of board members who abused their authority. Sharon's trial took place the following spring. I was called to testify, along with several other homeowners and the contractor. The evidence was overwhelming. Sharon was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 18 months in prison, plus restitution of the stolen funds and 5 years of probation. The Sunridge Meadows HOA underwent a complete transformation. Linda Patterson proved to be an excellent president, focused on transparency and communication. The board implemented new policies requiring homeowner approval for any project over $10,000 and mandatory third-party review of all construction plans. The new sidewalk was finally completed in May, almost a year after the original construction had begun. This time, it was done right, with proper permits, engineered drainage systems, and minimal disruption to the existing landscaping. My new French drain was actually more efficient than the old one, and I had not had a single drop of water in my crawlspace since it was installed. I was sitting on my front porch on a Saturday morning in late May when Pete Lawson walked by with his dog. He stopped to chat. "Looks good, doesn't it?" he said, gesturing at the completed sidewalk. "It does," I agreed. "Only took a year, a lawsuit, and a criminal investigation to get it done right," Pete laughed. "Well, at least we don't have to deal with Sharon anymore. Linda actually listens when people raise concerns. That is a low bar, but I will take it." We talked for a few more minutes about neighborhood news. The HOA was planning a fall festival, and there was talk of renovating the community center. Normal, boring HOA stuff. It was refreshing after Pete left. I thought about everything that had happened. The whole ordeal had been exhausting and expensive, even with the settlement covering most of the costs. I had spent countless hours dealing with attorneys, engineers, inspectors, and board meetings. But in the end, it had been worth it. We had held the HOA accountable, protected our properties, and removed a corrupt board member who had no business being in a position of authority. The experience had taught me some important lessons about HOAs and community governance. The system only works if people pay attention and get involved. Sharon had been able to abuse her power because most homeowners did not attend meetings or question board decisions. Once people started paying attention and demanding accountability, the whole corrupt structure collapsed pretty quickly. I also learned that documentation is everything. The certified letters, emails, photos, videos, and engineers' reports had been crucial in proving our case. Without that paper trail, it would have been our word against Sharon's, and the outcome might have been very different. As I sat there in the morning sun, watching neighbors walk by on the new sidewalk, I felt a sense of satisfaction. My house was protected, the drainage system worked perfectly, and the neighborhood was in better hands. The foundation cracks had been repaired, the landscaping had been restored, and life had returned to normal. David Chen walked by with his 2 kids on bikes. He waved and called out, "Looking good, Grant." I waved back. "You too, David." His house had required the most extensive foundation repairs, nearly $20,000 worth of work. But it was all done now, paid for by the settlement, and his family could enjoy their home without worrying about water damage every time a storm rolled through. That afternoon, I was working in my backyard when I heard a knock at the front door. I walked around to find Linda Patterson standing there with a clipboard. "Hi, Grant," she said with a smile. "I am doing a neighborhood survey about potential improvements to the common areas. Do you have a few minutes?" "Sure," I said, curious about what she had in mind. We sat on my front porch and went through the survey. Linda was asking about things like additional street lighting, upgrading the playground equipment, and potentially adding a dog park. All reasonable ideas that actually served the community. "I also wanted to thank you personally," Linda said when we finished the survey. "I know the whole sidewalk situation was a nightmare, but your willingness to stand up to Sharon and fight for what was right made a huge difference." A lot of people were too intimidated to speak up. "I had help," I said. "Pete, David, and the others were just as involved." "True, but you were the first one to push back. You set the example. The neighborhood is better off because of it." After Linda left, I went back to my backyard project. I was building a raised garden bed, something I had been planning for months. As I worked, I thought about how different things could have been. If I had just accepted the HOA's decision, paid the fines, and kept quiet, my house might have suffered serious foundation damage. The other homeowners would have been in the same boat, dealing with costly repairs and an unresponsive board. Instead, we had fought back and we had won. Not just in terms of the settlement money, but in taking back control of our community from someone who saw the HOA as a personal fiefdom rather than a service organization. The sun was setting when I finally finished the garden bed. I stood back and admired my work, hands dirty and shoulders sore. It felt good to build something, to make a tangible improvement to my property. I went inside, cleaned up, and made dinner. As I ate, I scrolled through my phone and saw that the Sunridge Meadows HOA Facebook page had posted about the fall festival. The comments were positive and enthusiastic, a stark contrast to the angry posts from a year ago. Things were not perfect. There were still occasional disputes about parking or noise complaints. Some homeowners were upset about the increased HOA dues needed to cover the settlement costs, even though insurance had paid the bulk of it. But overall, the neighborhood was in a much better place. A few weeks later, I ran into Michelle Henderson at the grocery store. We chatted about the neighborhood and how her family was doing. "We actually got a letter from Sharon," Michelle said. "It was an apology letter, part of her restitution agreement. She had to write to everyone who was affected by what she did." "What did it say?" "It was pretty generic, honestly. Said she was sorry for the harm she caused and that she took full responsibility for her actions. It felt like something her lawyer wrote for her." Probably was, I agreed, but at least she had to acknowledge what she did. Yeah, you know what is weird? I almost feel bad for her. I mean, she brought it all on herself, but 18 months in prison seems harsh. She stole money and endangered people's homes, I said. She had multiple chances to do the right thing and chose not to. I don't feel bad at all, Michelle nodded. You are right. I guess I am just not used to thinking of someone I knew ending up in prison. It is surreal. I understood what she meant. Sharon had been a fixture in the neighborhood, someone we saw at the grocery store and the gas station. Despite everything she had done, it was still strange to think of her in prison. But actions have consequences, and Sharon's actions had been particularly egregious. She had not just made a mistake or an error in judgment. She had deliberately ignored warnings, falsified records, stolen money, and then tried to intimidate people into silence when they complained. That was not a mistake. It was a pattern of corrupt behavior that deserved punishment. As the months went by, life in Sunridge Meadows settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new board was competent and responsive. The drainage systems worked perfectly through another monsoon season. My garden bed produced tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. It was everything a neighborhood should be: quiet, functional, and drama-free. I still kept all the documentation from the Sidewalk saga in a file box in my office. Occasionally, I would get a call or email from someone in another HOA who was dealing with similar issues, usually someone who had read about our case online. I would share my experience and offer advice. Document everything, get professional assessments, do not be afraid to involve the authorities when necessary, and organize with your neighbors. One evening in early autumn, I was sitting on my back patio with a beer, enjoying the cooler weather. My phone rang. It was Marcus Chen, my attorney. Hey, Grant, I have some news you might find interesting. Remember Sharon's criminal case? Of course. Well, she just filed an appeal. Her new attorney is arguing that the reckless endangerment charge was inappropriate because she did not intend to damage anyone's property. I felt a flash of anger. Are you kidding me? She knowingly proceeded with construction that she was warned would cause problems. I know. The appeal probably will not go anywhere, but I thought you should know. There is a chance you might have to testify again if the appeal court orders a new hearing. Whatever it takes, I said. She needs to be held accountable. The appeal process dragged on for months. Sharon's attorney argued that while his client had made poor decisions, they did not rise to the level of criminal recklessness. The prosecutor countered that Sharon had been explicitly warned by multiple homeowners, and even by her own contractor about the dangers of removing the drainage systems, and she had proceeded anyway. That demonstrated a conscious disregard for the safety of others. In the end, the appellate court upheld the conviction. Sharon would serve her full sentence. I received a call from the prosecutor's office informing me of the decision. I felt a sense of closure, knowing that the legal process had run its course and justice had been served. Life continued to improve in Sunridge Meadows. The fall festival was a huge success, with hundreds of residents attending. There were food trucks, a bounce house for kids, and a band playing classic rock covers. I volunteered to help with setup, and spent the day chatting with neighbors I had never really talked to before. Pete Lawson and I ended up manning the grill together, cooking burgers and hot dogs for the crowd. It was simple, mindless work, and it felt good to contribute to something positive in the community. Hard to believe it has been over a year since all that craziness with Sharon and the sidewalk, Pete said as he flipped a burger. Feels like ancient history now, I agreed. Think we will ever have to deal with something like that again? I hope not. But if we do, at least we know what to do. We have proof that you can fight back against HOA corruption and win. True. Still, I would rather just enjoy my retirement and not have to become an amateur lawyer and activist. We both laughed. The festival wrapped up around sunset, and volunteers stayed to clean up. As I was breaking down tables and hauling trash bags to the dumpster, Linda Patterson approached me. "Grant, I wanted to run something by you. The board is creating a new architectural review committee, and we need volunteers who understand construction and drainage issues. Would you be interested in serving?" I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to get more involved in HOA politics. But then I thought about why the sidewalk disaster had happened in the first place, because the people making decisions did not understand or care about the technical details. "Yeah, I will do it," I said, "on one condition. The committee has to have actual authority to reject projects that do not meet engineering standards. No rubber stamping bad ideas just because the board wants to move forward." "Agreed," Linda said. "That is exactly why we are creating the committee. We want technical experts making technical decisions." I joined the Architectural Review Committee in November, along with Pete and an engineer from the neighborhood named Thomas Wright. Our first task was to review the proposed renovation plans for the community center. The board wanted to expand the building and add a new meeting room. We spent weeks going over the plans, consulting with the architect, and making sure everything was properly engineered and permitted. It was tedious work, but it was also satisfying to know that we were preventing another disaster like the sidewalk debacle. In December, the Sunridge Meadows HOA held its annual meeting. This was typically a boring affair where the board presented the budget and answered a few questions. But this year was different. The room was packed with homeowners who wanted to hear about all the changes that had been implemented since Sharon's removal. Linda gave a comprehensive presentation on the new policies, the financial status of the HOA, and the plans for the coming year. She also addressed the sidewalk situation directly, acknowledging the mistakes that had been made and outlining the steps taken to prevent similar issues in the future. "We have learned some hard lessons this year," Linda said, "but I believe our community is stronger for it. We now have better oversight, more transparency, and a commitment to doing things the right way, even if it takes longer or costs more. That is the standard we are holding ourselves to going forward." The homeowners gave her a standing ovation. It was a remarkable turnaround from the anger and frustration that had dominated meetings a year earlier. After the meeting, several people came up to me to shake my hand and thank me for standing up to Sharon. It was a little embarrassing, honestly. I had just done what anyone should do when faced with injustice. I had fought back. As winter settled in and the holidays approached, I found myself reflecting on the entire experience. The sidewalk saga had consumed a huge portion of my life for over a year. It had been stressful, expensive, and at times deeply frustrating. But it had also brought the community together in unexpected ways. Neighbors who had barely known each other before were now friends. People were more engaged in HOA affairs and more willing to speak up when something did not seem right. On Christmas Eve, I was stringing lights on my front porch when David Chen walked by with his family. They were bundled up against the cold, the kids excited about Santa coming that night. "Merry Christmas, Grant," David called out. "Merry Christmas," I replied. His younger daughter, maybe 6 years old, tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, is that the man who saved our house?" David looked a little embarrassed, but he smiled. "Yeah, sweetie, he helped. A lot of people helped." The girl waved at me enthusiastically. I waved back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the Christmas lights. That was what it was all about, really. Not the legal victories or the news coverage or the satisfaction of seeing Sharon held accountable. It was about protecting homes and families. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. As the new year began, I made a resolution to stay involved in the community. I continued serving on the Architectural Review Committee, and I made a point of attending board meetings and staying informed about HOA decisions. I never wanted to be in a position again where I was caught off guard by a bad decision that affected my property. In March, the community center renovation was completed. The HOA held a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and once again, the neighborhood turned out in force. The new building was beautiful, with modern amenities and plenty of space for community events. Pete and I stood in the back of the crowd, watching as Linda cut the ribbon. "We did good work on this project," Pete said. "Everything was done right, proper permits, good engineering, no shortcuts." "That is how it should always be," I replied. As spring turned to summer, I spent more time in my garden and less time thinking about HOA drama. The tomatoes were coming in strong, and I had more peppers than I knew what to do with. I started giving away produce to neighbors, which led to more conversations and stronger connections. One Saturday afternoon in June, exactly 2 years after the sidewalk construction had begun, I was working in my front yard when a car pulled up. A young couple got out and started looking at the house across the street, which had a for sale sign in the yard. I walked over to introduce myself. "Thinking about buying?" I asked. The woman nodded. "We love the neighborhood. The realtor told us there was some drama with the HOA a while back, but that things are much better now. Is that true?" I thought about how to answer that. I could tell them the whole ugly story and potentially scare them away, or I could sugarcoat it and not give them the full picture. "There was a situation with the previous HOA president," I said honestly. "She made some bad decisions that caused problems for several homeowners. But she was removed, and the new board is excellent. They are transparent, responsive, and they actually care about doing right by the community. I would not hesitate to recommend this neighborhood now." The couple seemed satisfied with that answer. They thanked me and went back to looking at the house. A week later, I saw moving trucks outside, and I walked over to welcome them to Sunridge Meadows. Life had returned to normal, or maybe even better than normal. The neighborhood was thriving, the HOA was functioning properly, and people felt safe and secure in their homes. The sidewalk that had caused so much trouble was now just another part of the landscape, unremarkable and functional. Sometimes I would walk down Sagebrush Lane and think about everything that had happened. The anger, the stress, the lawsuits, the criminal trial. It all seemed like a distant memory now, like something that had happened to someone else, but the lessons remained. I had learned that you cannot trust people in authority just because they hold a title. You have to verify, document, and hold them accountable. I had learned that communities are stronger when people work together and support each other. And I had learned that standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, is always worth it. As I walked back to my house that evening, the sun setting behind the mountains in the distance, I felt grateful for my home, my neighborhood, and the community we had built together. The French drain system was working perfectly, just as it should. And every time it rained, I smiled knowing that my foundation was protected and my home was safe. That was all I had ever wanted, really. Just a safe, well-maintained home in a community that functioned properly. It should not have been so difficult to achieve, but sometimes you have to fight for the things that matter. And when you do, when you stand your ground and refuse to be intimidated, you can win. Sharon Pemberton was still in prison, serving her sentence. The money she stole had been repaid. The damage she caused had been fixed. Justice had been served, and Sunridge Meadows had emerged from the crisis stronger and better than before. I sat on my front porch that night, watching the stars come out, and felt a deep sense of peace. The Sidewalk saga was over. The community had survived and thrived, and I had played a small part in making that happen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new HOA meetings, new decisions to be made. But I was ready for whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that ordinary people can make a difference when they refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. The French drain continued to work perfectly, channeling water away from my foundation, just as it was designed to do. And every time it rained, I was reminded of why the fight had been worth it.